When I had initially gone to True Leave, which is a dispensary here in the state of Florida, when I had gone over to Tampa to listen to one of their classes for guys who were suffering from PTSD or from traumatic brain injury, and I got over there and they brought everybody out. I initially asked the question, "Hey, can you overdose on cannabis?" And of course, everybody in the room kind of broke out laughing. Listen, I don't know for sure. I mean, I need to know. And the doctor was there, said, "It's impossible for you to overdose on cannabis." And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Listen, most of the chemicals in our body that are pain relieving are kept in the brainstem." She goes, "So we take that chemical that's in there and we copy it and we make it synthetically and we can introduce it to your body. The problem is that if you get too much of it, the same thing as your brainstem does, which is regulates your breathing or your heart or the way your nerves function. So by overdosing on that, you can cut those functions off." They didn't find out till 1998 that our bodies actually have an endocannabinoid system in there. And there's some doctors now that are looking at it from a perspective of, hey, these endocannabinoid systems actually play a role in cancer. And we believe that when you're endocannabinoid deficient, that cancer has a much greater process of showing up. So I started to understand. I said, "So tell me more about this endocannabinoid system in our bodies and what it does." And she said, basically, as you ingest cannabis, and she said, "We'd like to not for you to smoke it because obviously it's still a carcinogen, but by ingesting it, has a true benefit to the body by releasing these endocannabinoids and keeping your body really at a higher rate of the ability not to get cancer or to have some of these terminal diseases." So she said, "There's still, because it's been federally illegal, we haven't been able really to study it. We recognize that within the traumatic brain injury, and when you look at football players and or the guys I was sitting with who'd been blown up, as a matter of fact, the scout sniper I told you that was with us has had 2 different episodes where he was actually blown up. He was wearing a helmet cam for one of them and was suffering from it. So when I asked the doctor, I said, "Listen, I need to know more about how the hell does cannabis work on somebody who has traumatic brain injury?" And I said, to keep it simple, because I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
So she said, "Hey, listen, it's like this." She goes, "The nerve's long. It has these things called axioms at the end. And as you have these impacts with the brain, these axioms get closer. If the axioms touch, it kills that part of the brain. For some reason," she said, "when people smoke cannabis, it makes that nerve longer. So those axons kind of move away from each other." And so that's exactly what I said. I was like, "Really?" So so the next thing I had with me that day,
science, man.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, and listen, I had another one with me where it was a gentleman who was suffering from Parkinson's disease. He was in Kentucky. This was not cannabis related; it was hemp related and CBD. And true CBD hemp oil only has 0.003 THC, so it's not like there's anything in there that's going to create a euphoric feeling. Mm-hmm. This poor guy was suffering from Parkinson's disease so bad that he couldn't get his coffee in his mouth. He was shaking so hard as he came up to his mouth. So she brought in some of this oil that was in a kind of like a syringe and squeezed it into his mouth. And within 4 minutes, he stopped shaking. And I was like,
"That's crazy."
I was like, "Come on."
Yeah.
I mean, is this real? So I'm telling the doctor, "Do you think that's real?" I mean, how could the medical profession not know this? This poor guy is shaking 24 hours, 7 days a week for the rest of his life when you can give him that, which contains no THC, and he stops within 4 minutes of shaking. And she started laughing. She said, "Listen, let's call the doctor. I know this doctor that's in this video. Let's call her." And he said, "Now, before I tell you this, before we call them, as a doctor, if I lie to you intentionally, I run the risk of losing my license. So she goes, I can tell you right now, this doctor doesn't want to lose her license. So I know there's no deception going on here, but let's find out what's really going on." So she called her up and, we broke into a 10-minute dissertation about what we were looking at. She said, "Listen, at the end of the day," I said to her, "How do you know this guy just doesn't have his own agenda? And this is his way of tricking the system so that, we've got to have this, legal." And she said, "Listen, it's, I agree with what you're saying. I didn't have something actually hooked up to him that would say, hey, this is what his heart rate's doing. This is what his senses are going on." She goes, "But I have a 9-year-old girl, and when I give her this stuff, it does the same thing to her. And I can assure you the 9-year-old girl doesn't have an agenda." So again, these benefits of cannabis, or again, in this case, it's hemp, are unbelievable. And I think that when you start looking across the board as to what it could do to help, again, to the vets, I'm all for it. That's my continued push in this whole process.
Yeah, and that's another huge thing is young kids with cancer, being a treatment for that.
Bingo. Just legalized here in Florida also. You can now, if your child is suffering from one of those diseases, you can actually legally, now, again, it'll probably be at the end of this month when it actually goes through the Senate and becomes law. But you'll actually be able to do that now in Florida, where parents before who lived in other states would have to move from that state to Colorado, let's say, to be able to treat their child.
Right.
So then all of a sudden you figure out these kids are gone from like having 15 or 20 seizures a week to like one a month. How can you not address that and say, our laws have been unjust? I get why they brought them into play, but they've been unjust.